Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Uplink, the Big Story. This week, Shasta is out, so I decided to mix it up a little bit. We're going to take a closer look at the recent testimony from FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker before lawmakers this week about the state of American aviation and the Federal Aviation Administration. Whitaker's recent testimony before lawmakers sheds light on the multifaceted challenges facing our industry. So there are the obvious challenges that have been making the news, including pilot mental health, the issues facing Boeing, workforce dilemmas, and the issues of a robust safety culture. And the administrator was keen to address all these things. Today, we're going to mix things up a little bit. We're going to dive into 4 not so obvious challenges facing the new FAA administrator, which lawmakers grilled him on. Amid these broader issues mentioned earlier, instead we're going to focus on the nuances of airline pilot retirement age. Should it be 65 or could it be 67? We'll also dive into the work from home rules for air traffic controllers. Should they or should they not be able to work from home? How does that work? We'll also talk about the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusions, which have been hotly debated recently, and the controversial use of airports for housing immigrants as part of the border crisis. These not so obvious topics offer a deeper look into the complexities of what it takes to run the FAA. And then there are the honorable mentions that lawmakers brought up. Issues like helicopter noise over New Jersey, or expanding GI Bill efforts for veterans for flight training, or the role that vaccine mandates have played in workforce shortage. And finally, the critical need for modernizing FAA's technological infrastructure. So we'll feature clips from the lawmakers, and we'll talk about the responses that the new administrator gave. So join us as we delve into these complex issues, unraveling how they not only shape the present, but will also define the future trajectory of American aviation. So think of this episode as a day in the life of the FAA administrator. All right, are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to Uplink. The aviation dialogue starts here. I'm Shasta Ways.
And I'm Michael Wiles.
Thank you for joining us.
First of all, let's talk about who Michael Whitaker is. According to an official biography from the FAA, Michael G. Whitaker became FAA Administrator in October 2023. He is responsible for helping to ensure the safe and efficient operation of the largest aerospace system in the world. Whitaker served as Deputy Administrator at the FAA from 2013 to 2016 and was also the Chief Next Gen Officer. Whitaker was responsible for the implementation of the FAA Next Gen modernization of the air traffic control system and moving from a radar to a satellite-enabled surveillance technology. Before this, Whitaker was Chief Operating Officer at Supernal. Supernal is a company designing an electric advanced air mobility vehicle, or an eVTOL. So let's talk about issue number 1. Should lawmakers raise the retirement age for airline pilots from age 65 to age 67? Here's a clip from the session.
March 5th, you sent it to Cantwell and Ted Cruz.
Yes, I have that.
All right. Did you write that letter?
Did I write the letter?
Yes, sir.
No, it was drafted for me.
It was drafted for you. Who drafted it?
That voice you're hearing is of Congressman Troy Nehls. He is a congressman from the 22nd Congressional District of Texas.
For technical assistance on various issues
Okay.
of the reauth bill.
Is this letter the official position of the FAA?
The letter that you're talking about comes from one the FAA sent to Congress on Monday, warning them not to raise the mandatory retirement age for airline pilots. In the letter, the FAA said it needed to study the safety implications before raising the age. Here's what Whitaker says to Congressman Nehls.
The position is that we don't have a position on the retirement age, but if it changes, we'd like to have data to support the change.
Okay.
Our role has been to identify issues around that, and we have identified 2. one about international compliance, and then one about understanding the data of changing the age from 65 to 67.
Okay. Did ALPA influence your decision to write this letter? Did ALPA
And
have any
here
influence
is
in
Congressman
the
Mills
drafting of
again.
this letter? In the letter, it talks about we always prioritize a robust process to identify risk and ensure mitigations to maintain safety, but we do not test in a live environment. Could you tell us what that means? The members up here, what the hell's a live environment? Explain that to me.
I think I believe what that means is we don't change a rule to see how it plays out. We usually like to do the research before we change a rule.
Okay. Would you consider, are you familiar with Basic Med? Basic Med, the study, the Basic Med safety study? All right. The FAA authorized it. They let it run. They looked at it after 3 years, like 2017, 2018, 2019, and they reported back to Congress. It's right here. I have it here. An FAA report submitted to Congress, as required, on March 10th, reviewed 3 years of general aviation data and concluded that the Basic Med program is safe. Isn't that a live study? I mean, they were flying around. These general aviators are flying around. They're looking at whether it's a third-class medical versus a Basic Med, and they found out that Basic Med works. That is a live study. Would you agree?
And Congressman Mills again.
I mean, come on. How could you not agree with that? They're flying around, and they're reporting back 3 years of data, and they're saying, hey, there's no issues with Basic Med. That's a live study.
Right.
Okay. Just want to get that, because it says we do not test in a live environment. That's not true.
And Congressman Mills again.
I believe that Basic Med safety study is a prime example, and I have a few more, I believe. It's interesting. ALPA is taking dues from pilots in Canada over the age of 65. ALPA is taking dues from pilots over the age of 65, and we know ALPA doesn't, they want to squash us. They don't want this retirement age raised. WestJet is flying ALPA-represented pilots over the age of 65 right now. Could you explain to everybody up here what a Part 135 is versus a 121?
A Part 135 carries a carrier typically under 30 passengers.
Sure.
Less, yeah.
NetJets would be an example?
That's correct.
All right. Do Part 121 and 135 share the same airspace?
They do.
They do. So they taxi with Part 121, i.e. the big airliners, folks, Delta, United, everything, and you can get this NetJet. Taylor Swift flying to the Super Bowl in her supersonic jet. They could be in the same airspace, taxiing on the same runway. Why do Part 135 that flies around the millionaires and the billionaires across the country, why can they fly to the age 67, but United and Delta, that gentleman, we fire him at 65? How does that make any sense?
So as you can see, the pilot retirement age, whether or not it should be age 65 for airline pilots or age 67, is one of the most hotly contested issues facing the industry today. And even though it seems there will be a delay in raising the age, sure enough, there will be continued discussion around the topic. What do you think? Should airline pilots be able to fly until age 67, or should they have to retire at 65?
Congress passed a law limiting them to 65.
Right.
And how do you feel about that? Do you think that's just? It's right.
Whitaker also faced a grilling on the current work from home allowances for air traffic controllers. The person doing the grilling was Congressman Pete Stauber, who is currently serving his second term in Congress as a representative from Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. Here's what he had to say.
Mr. Stauber, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. How many days a week do the employees have to show up in a 2-week work period?
The policy, again, it depends on the employee, but and the job description, but the baseline is 4 days.
What if our air traffic controllers only showed up 4 days in their work week? Would it affect?
And here's how Whitaker responded.
Aviation?
Well, as I mentioned, they show up every day for their jobs.
I understand that. What I'm trying to get at is, what if our controllers just showed up 4 out of a 2-week work period, 4 days? Would that interrupt our work?
Well, they can't control traffic from home.
I understand that.
Certainly would.
You know what I'm getting at. If they only showed up, would it be a problem for our airports and general aviation, commercial aviation across our country? Yes or no?
Of course.
You know, and I know workplace flexibility is an important recruiting tool in our new world. However, as an agency with a safety mission first, do you find that a 2-day in-person work week rather low?
So why is this an issue? Well, in last July, the FAA announced that employees would have to return to the office no fewer than 3 days per week, starting on October 9. It faced strong pushback from the controller union against 100% return to office, which made it complicated for the agency to reinstate its policy. This comes as the FAA is facing a critical shortage of air traffic controllers to handle the number of airplanes in the national airspace system, and also while Whitaker during the testimony had to speak about controller fatigue. So the question we have for you is, what are the appropriate work from home policies that should be implemented for controllers?
Under the FAA's most recent controller workplace plan submitted to Congress, when retirements and other attrition is accounted for, the hiring plan produces a negligible improvement over today's understaffed levels, resulting in a net increase of fewer than 200 aircraft controllers by 2032. This is extremely concerning for safety and efficiency of the aviation system.
Okay, next topic. Are diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives ruining aviation? Here's what one lawmaker had to say.
Mr. Garcia, I recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew.
You know, last month, the fuselage of a domestic Boeing 737 MAX exploded open at 16,000 feet. I know you're real aware of it. There are 180 people on board.
So that is Congressman Jefferson Van Drew of New Jersey. Here's more of what he had to say.
In my opinion, is the result of decades-long process of globalization. Spirit Aero is now a, quote, global corporation, and it has been identified by the FAA as responsible. You all identified it as responsible for the faulty components behind the Alaskan Airlines incident. This is one example of how Boeing's outsourcing has led to Boeing's decline. And Boeing has hidden its decline, in my opinion, and many, by appealing to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and for its investors, because it's a cool thing to be.
As you may know, since 2020, and amid a critical workforce shortage, the aviation industry has embraced diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to boost its workforce recruitment tactics. However, the industry has come under fire of late. Many public commentators have said that the issues the industry is currently facing that are related to safety are because of initiatives from diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here's what Whitaker had to say in response to Congressman Van Drew's question.
Mr. Whitaker, are you concerned by the trajectory of Boeing as an American institution?
My concern is that Boeing makes safe aircraft, so I'm less concerned about externalities. I'm more concerned about the quality of the aircraft coming off the line, and that's our focus.
I would maintain it's part and parcel. They have a job to worry about safety, efficiency, and when you're worried about...
So what are your thoughts? Sure enough, this will be a topic that will continue to be hotly contested this year. Are diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to boost recruitment in the industry a part of the safety and quality control issues of the industry? And finally, the last topic that we'll talk about is the FAA's role in the border crisis and the housing of illegal immigrants at airports. Take a listen to what some of the questions were that Whitaker faced.
Has the FAA approved any requests to house illegal foreign nationals?
The FAA does approve.
That was Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania.
I want to follow up with my colleague, Mr. Perry's line of questioning. Mr. Perry read to you from the manual about how a non-aeronautical purpose at an airport has to be approved by the FAA, and you stated that only one airport had approval to be used for the non-aeronautical purpose of housing migrants. Would you like to correct that answer, or is that the answer you want to stick by? So it's well documented that many airports have been used for this purpose. So do you think these airports are in violation of any federal law, or do you think they found a way around that?
That was Congressman Bruce Westerman of Arkansas.
You got a tiger by the tail. Using airports for housing undocumented, That's a big deal. It's a big deal to the communities these airports are in. It's a big deal fiscally. It's a big deal for safety. And I know you're new, so I want to be fair, but we need you to drill down and tell us more what's going on. Please.
And then that's Mr. Van Drew again.
I think it's a totally inappropriate use.
So what is this all about, and what does this have to do with aviation? Well, Whitaker told the lawmakers he was aware of only one migrant housing request that the FAA received and approved last year, which allowed the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey to provide migrants with a space at a warehouse adjacent to JFK. Beyond that, here is his response.
To my knowledge, and this is not an issue that I've only been there 3 months, not an issue I've spent much time on, but to my knowledge, there was only one application. It's also my understanding that applications are only involved if it's behind security. So other properties on airports don't come through our office for approval. It's really just behind security properties.
So what's going on here? Well, the FAA doesn't directly operate airports. They're operated by municipalities and state government. So those agencies have to work directly with an airport to seek permission from the FAA to allow temporary use of airport properties for non-aviation purposes. So in order for an airport to be approved to be used for these type of things, they have to meet certain objectives that don't impede safety or whether or not the property might be needed for aviation-related purposes. Still, it was very interesting to see just how wide an oversight is needed to run the FAA.
That information.
I can commit to making sure that we're complying with the law around any approvals.
Mr. Whitaker, I appreciate that, but we really need.
We don't own the airports. So
I know, but it deals. But you're a very important part of what happens at the airport. You should be included. You should be part of it. The people, quite frankly.
Okay, let's talk about the honorable mentions. The first one is helicopter noise. Here's a clip from the hearing.
Today I want to focus on the constant helicopter noise we face in our district, in New Jersey's 8th Congressional District. It's a densely populated urban
So
area.
that's Congressman Rob Menendez from New Jersey.
Helicopters that fly at low altitudes for prolonged periods of time, shaking apartment buildings and disrupting enjoyment of public spaces. Residents are also concerned that helicopters have been using new flight paths without input or notice to residents. How does the FAA monitor and enforce helicopter?
The issue here is helicopter noise over the New York metropolitan area. The New York metropolitan area has one of the highest rate of helicopter use in the world. Over the past decade, that area has seen an increased number of non-essential tourism and commuter helicopters. In that area, helicopter-related noise complaints have gone up by as much as 2,300% in the last 5 years. All of this is from a letter that the congressman sent to the FAA last March. So how is the FAA tackling this issue? Here's what Whitaker said his agency would do.
To address persistent and burdensome helicopter noise?
So I think the most effective tool that we have found is community meetings sponsored by a government entity, usually an airport, that are open and inclusive, so include not only the immediate affected areas, but also areas surrounding that, so that there's an ability to have a community dialogue around solutions.
Okay, next notable mention, the GI Bill for training. Here's a clip.
Another thing in the line of in that line of questioning with pilot shortages, training is a big issue and getting pilots, through that process. And it just came to my attention that the GI Bill, it's a great program for veterans, and it covers a lot of things, but it doesn't cover some of the things that you need to become a pilot. And I would think using a GI Bill to get those hours that you need to become a certified pilot may be more important than basket weaving, a degree in basket weaving, which the GI Bill will cover. So would you be supportive of having more flexibility in the GI Bill so that we could use that money that these veterans have earned in service to their country in order to become pilots?
Here's a response.
I absolutely would, and I would favor treating pilot training the way you treat any other educational endeavor to get a status. It's expensive to become a pilot, takes a long time, so I would fully support that.
Are vaccine mandates contributing to the air traffic controller shortage? Here's a clip.
Another question that I have is, I know a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there were some pilots who left because of vaccine mandates. and I don't know if the air traffic controllers had that same issue, but what are you doing to make it easier for them to come back to work?
Here's a response.
It's not an issue that I've run across. I'll look into that and happy to respond.
What do you think? Let us know. And finally, when is the FAA going to update its software? Here's a clip.
The Department of Transportation spent a lot of time on just changing the name of that acronym instead of updating that 30-year-old software, which was where they should have had their focus. Can you tell me what steps you've taken since your confirmation to speed up the modernization of technology, where we're at on NOTAM, and what other specific systems you may have updated?
And here's a response.
So I think one of the challenges that we have is as we do modernize, we get stuck with a lot of legacy systems that are hard to take out of the airspace. Even some of the systems that were in place before we were born are still used. And sometimes it's the military that relies on those systems, and sometimes it's just folks that have been flying a long time. So we end up supporting a huge amount of antiquated systems, and that impedes our ability to modernize. There's been a lot of modernization over the past 10 or 15 years, but there are over 1,000 systems that make up the airspace. Some of them are pretty old, and I think what we saw with the NOTAM is we really need to have the redundancies in place to make sure that if there's a failure, it doesn't bring the whole system to a halt. So I think the next gen phase is over, and now we need to talk about how these new technologies, advanced air mobilities and drones are coming into the system and how it's going to operate in the future.
All right, so that's all I have for you today. As you can see, running the FAA is a tall order. It goes beyond the stuff that makes the news every day, whether it's Boeing's challenges or workforce shortages or just the easy things that come to mind. In this new role, FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker has a lot to deal with, but it seems like he has the support of these lawmakers as he steps into this new role. So, is there anything that caught your attention? Anything that surprised you? Anything that you think needs further expounding on? Reach out to us, send us an email, find us on social media. We'd be happy to tackle it in the next episode. All right, that's all I have. See you guys next week.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. Before we move on, we've got just a couple of important housekeeping notes for all of our listeners out there. The first is join Uplink Link Up community. Here's one benefit of joining. If you're looking to dive deeper into the world of aviation and join the conversation, we'd love for you to be a part of our Uplink Link Up community. It's a great space where enthusiasts like you can discuss, debate, and share insights about everything aviation. Joining is super easy. Just head over to our website or check out the show notes for the link in our Uplink Link Up WhatsApp group. We have a general group for aviation discussions, and we have a special Uplink Link Up DC Metro group for our listeners in the DC area. Being part of Uplink Link Up means you get to interact directly with us and other aviation enthusiasts. It's a fantastic way to get your questions answered, share your opinions, and even influence future podcast topics. So don't miss out on being part of the Uplink Link Up community. Join today and take your love for aviation to new heights. We can't wait to interact with you all. Again, thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you next week.